ministers of the council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and other radio stations. I am Charity Dunker, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. At this time, I call on the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Perry Hearlings, to address you.
Martin, I have some announcements to make today, and I will start off with an article that was published today in the Daily Herald, but I will go over it for convenience. Many business owners have had to resort to specific austerity measures to contend with the stagnant economy that followed the hurricanes. This is also true for the average person who has had to endure being laid off or has had to work less hours and receive less pay. Thankfully, over the last 6 to 8 months, there are some signs of life in our economy. Many people are returning to work after more than a year, and those that were given limited work hours and pay are resuming regular work hours and pay, as more businesses are opening and visitors are returning to the island. Much of the improvements that we see taking place today come from the strength of our local businesses and our residents. The businesses are the ones we depend on to not only hire our citizens to work, but also to pay their taxes, much in the same way we depend on the individual citizens to make their tax contributions to government of St. Martin. That is a heavy burden for businesses at this crucial time. And while we recognize that some companies can and have been making their tax payments, we understand that some businesses, especially the smaller businesses and residents, need some assistance. Therefore, I have instructed the Ministry of Finance, and more in particular the Receiver's Office, to offer an extension on the tax payments to businesses who have outstanding amounts that they believe they can pay all at once, that they can't pay all at once if they were given additional time. I have also included all other taxpayers who for one reason or another have been unable to bring their tax payments up to date. We want to create a sense of ease within our community, especially for those nearing pension age and our senior citizens. The offer has been extended to include everyone, as the problem with the stagnant economy is a problem that affects us all. I want to encourage each citizen who has outstanding taxes to go to the Receiver's Office and see what options will be fit for your particular situation. Some persons with outstanding taxes will be offered a payment plan. This payment plan will allow business owners and residents to pay their taxes in between 4 and 12 months. But in exceptional cases, it can be up to 18 months. This process is not automatic, and if you wish to take advantage of the opportunity, please go to the Receiver's Office and make your request for financial relief. Once you have been granted an extension, you will become exempt from the late fees that would usually apply. Each application will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis to determine the type of relief that is best suited for the business to make its tax payments to government. But also, we are busy reviewing the issues with arrears applicable to fiscal years going back 5 years and longer. As soon as we have information on that particular issue, I will inform the public in general. And in closing, on this subject, I really want to thank those businesses and individuals who continue to pay their taxes and urge everyone to ensure that they meet their tax obligations to the government as is prescribed by law. A correction in the article of the Daily Herald is also in place, because reading that article, it looks like this exemption or this relief facility is only applicable to the business community. But just for clarity's sake, it is also applicable for all citizens of Sint Maarten. Then I would like to go over to the budget 2019. As I mentioned in last week's press briefing on questions from Ms. Alita Singh, we know that our budget was on its way to Parliament, or it was already at Parliament. I'm happy to announce to you that the first handling of the budget are scheduled in a CC meeting, and these are scheduled for next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. As you also know, because of the 11th hour advice from the CFT in November last year, where the CFT had doubts about our expense side of the budget to the tune of 503, they suggested to the Kingdom Council of Ministers to have it kept on an amount of 475. The Kingdom Council then took a decision to approve that budget with the condition that we would continue talks with the CFT and find a consensus. Well, that's what we managed to do. We reached a consensus, and the amount now on the expenditures is kept at 478,800,000 guilders. And if we compare the budget deficit of 2018, which was approximately 105 million guilders, the expected deficit for 2019 is set at 67,300,000. That means we improved on our deficit, for lack of other word, by 37.7 million guilders. This is due to the economic growth that is ongoing, and of course the contribution, as I earlier mentioned, on the contributions from businesses, the hotel sector that is also moving forward, and the citizens that take up their responsibility by continue paying their taxes. Then I also, on the income side of our budget, we have an approximate amount of 401 million. If you compare that to the income that we expected in 2018, that was set at 370 million. So that means that on the income side, we have an improvement of 31 million, or 8.4% in comparison with the expected income of 2018. If we also take a brief look at the IMF reporting, the IMF is reporting that the economic growth that started off in 2018 will continue in 2019. And that means that our nominal gross national product will be approximately 4.5% higher than the traditional limited growth numbers that we usually have. This will cause a higher income generating effect for the coffers of Sint Maarten. The IMF also reported that a positive effect on our income will also be caused by the total reform of our tax department and our public financial department. For both reforms, the two plans of actions are ready, and they are due to be in the CoM next week, Tuesday, for approval. This is needed because in discussions and talks, negotiations with the Netherlands, I reached an agreement with them that for the financing of the reforms of these two very important departments in our government, that they will work along with me to finance these projects. So, upon getting the approval in the Council of Ministers next week, the plans, which are in conceptual phase already in the Netherlands, they will be sent, the final plans will then be sent to the Netherlands, and we will further negotiate the finance proposal, and which I will share with my colleague ministers in the Council of Ministers as well. So, in essence, those two plans of actions are important for the progress of the financing, the income of country Sint Maarten. I cannot emphasize that more, the importance thereof. Then we also received from the CFT their Article 25 advice. The Article 25 advice is there to allow us to deviate from Article 15, which actually says that you have to produce a balanced budget. And this advice was positive, and that will be presented to the Kingdom Council of Ministers. It will be on the agenda of March 22nd for approval. So, all in all, this means that all the work that we have been doing together with my fellow ministers and their ministries, my finance department, that we managed to reach this consensus, and this is rather positive advice from CFT. I would like to give kudos to everybody involved for a job well done. It was a tremendous undertaking, I can assure you. Then I would like to also briefly give you an update on, if I can find it. To go back to our number plates, I would like to report to you, and these are numbers from last week because of problems with our ICT system, not unusual. I could not produce the numbers as of today, but as of last week, we have sold 22,081 plates. This represents 76% in comparison with last year. That resulted in a total income of 7,384,000 guilders. So that is what we, and I expect it to be higher at this point in time, but that is the latest on the income on the number plates. That is it for now, and I'm fully available to your questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Geerlings, for your opening remarks. At this time, I call on the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and good morning and greetings to all gathered here. My colleague ministers, the Department of Communication, members of the press, as well as those listening and viewing via radio, television, and social media. Good morning, Sualiga. Last week I had the privilege to visit the National Institute for Professional Advancement, the NIPA, with a delegation of representatives from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. The board of the institution and a team of staff members gave a presentation on the operations of the school. The school has undertaken what we call a self-study. A committee consisting of the staff was established to assess how the school is performing in various areas, such as the curriculum, how effective is the teaching, student performance. They also looked at their admission policies and their exit or exam policies. And basically what it is, it was a complete review of the school. And of course, recommendations were given as to how to improve the NEPA product. As a 5-year-old institute, there has been some upheaval in its development, and at this point, steps are being taken to resolve some of the issues, the challenges that the school has encountered over the years. And I'm looking forward to further updates from the school on their progress as they move forward. St. Martin will be hosting the Adam Sanford All-Star T20 tournament from March 28th through the 31st. This is a great move for cricket and for the overall development of sports on the island. The matches will be played on the grounds of the Carib Lumber Ballpark, and I encourage you, cricket fans, young and old, to go out and to enjoy the games. Remember, sports matter. On Sunday, I was honored to attend the graduation ceremony of 19 persons who completed a home care service course organized by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The course offered training in care for the elderly and indigent persons in our community. Of the 19 persons who graduated, 17 were female and 2 were male. You don't see many males going into the care service these days. So, congratulations to the 2 males as well as to their 17 female colleagues on choosing to work and dedicate themselves to serving those in need. Keep up the great work. Last November, the members of Parliament passed a motion with instructions for the Minister of Education to draft a safe school plan within 60 days and to give a progress report within 30 days. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to meet those target dates. However, today I will be submitting a detailed progress report on all that this ministry, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, has done and continues to do in efforts to reduce violent and aggressive behaviors in schools and also in our communities. The work of developing a safe school plan is ongoing, and the relevant departments and divisions within the ministry are dedicated to its completion. Thank you to all the stakeholders for their contributions. Thank you to the members of my cabinet and all the departments and divisions within the ministry for their cooperation and for their assistance on this mission. As we focus and unite, the youth of St. Martin will have better opportunities and more peaceful and safe schools to attend. On Monday last, I had a meeting with the Vice President of the French Collectivité, Miss Valérie Damasseau, and her delegation joined my team of representatives to discuss cultural development and how we can structurally give support to each other. We talked about cooperation in the area of joint celebrations, like the commemoration of the Treaty of Concordia, which takes place on March 23rd. This year, it will be 371 years since this treaty was signed. We also discussed collaborating on having joint programs to commemorate our emancipation from slavery, which is officially celebrated on May 28th on the French side and July 1st on the Dutch side. And of course, we discussed our joint celebration of St. Martin's Day, November 11th. As it regards St. Martin Day, we talked about making it a more cultural celebration for the people of both sides of the island. During our working session, cultural collaboration was highlighted. However, we also touched on collaboration in the area of sports, youth, and education. In order to continue and develop the spirit of cooperation between both sides in the areas of culture, youth, and sports, Vice President Damaso and myself have agreed to meet on a quarterly basis. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 13th. All in all, I would say we had a very productive session, and I expect that Sualigans will soon see the benefits of our collaborations. When we focus and when we unite, all our people, both North and South, will be better for it. And finally, the new lights at the Raoul Illich Sports Complex. I just came from the complex where I greeted the persons who had come from Holland to establish or set up the lighting. And together with the National Sports Institute, the NSI, I'm proud to announce that the installation of 4 new lights, of 4 new light fixtures has been completed at the Raoul Illich Sports Complex. This is a culmination of lengthy discussions and collaboration with entities like the St. Martin government, the NSI, the Netherlands Olympic Committee, the Netherlands Sports Federation, and the Dutch Football Federation, the KNVB. And all of this started early back in 2018. To assist with the needed repairs, government not only made monies available, but also engaged in talks and collaborated with these international agencies to ensure that more funds could have been made available for the much needed repairs and for the rebuilding of our sports facilities. In the case of the lights, the Raoul Illich Sports Complex, besides the funding, also gave the necessary assistance. And this assistance also came from the Netherlands Olympic Committee, the Netherlands Sports Federation, and logistics and engineering expertise came through the Dutch Football Federation, the KNVB. Together with the NSI, I would like to thank the International Olympic Committee, the Dutch government, the Netherlands Olympic Committee, the Netherlands Sports Federation, André Bolhuis, the Dutch Football Federation, KNVB, Johan van Gijn, and Jan Willem de Boer, and Joost Vlot of Oostendorp, Nederland BV, for their assistance in making this possible. We would also like to thank the St. Martin Soccer Association for their assistance with the temporary lights at the facility following the hurricane. The NSI expects to return to regular scheduling soon, and this information of their regular scheduling would be made available to the general public. Thank you, and I remain available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, to address you.
Good morning to the members of the media, my colleague ministers in the council, and to those listening via radio, television, or the internet. After consultation with the Department of Civil Aviation, Shipping, and Maritime, I have signed an agreement approving a 3-year extension of the cooperation protocol on the support from the Netherlands to St. Martin in the area of aeromedical services. This agreement outlines in detail the cooperation between the Ministry of TIAT in St. Martin and the Netherlands ILT inspectors as it relates to the audit of the flight medical doctors or aeromedical examiners of St. Martin. These ILT inspectors will perform inspections on the flight medical doctors of St. Martin would of course have to have as compliance. This is necessary for the doctors to be appointed AME,
aeromedical examiners, as based on international safety requirements are necessary. The agreement was first entered into 2013 for 5 years and expired on July 26, 2018. It is important to note that this agreement comes with no financial cost to country St. Martin, and the tasks performed by the ILT inspectors will be managed by the head of the Department of Civil Aviation, Mr. Lewis Holly. A frequent topic of discussion nowadays is the use of drones and whether they are safe or how far they are allowed to infringe on an individual's right to privacy in their homes. As Minister responsible of TIAT for aviation, it is also a significant safety concern as the careless and improper use of these drones can cause severe damage. I have also considered that the airspace in St. Martin is, like in many countries, a vital part of our way of life, in which we depend on a safe airspace for the arrival and departure of aircraft. The protection of our sky is even more important and critical today, both for the continued protection of lives and the protection of our very fragile economy. It is against this backdrop that the Cabinet of TIAT, in consultation with the Department of Civil Aviation, Shipping and Maritime, has identified some key areas that will now be considered no-fly zones by ministerial decree for drones or other remotely operated aircraft. The restricted areas are as follows: 3 kilometers from the Princess Juliana International Airport, 500 meters from the harbor, 100 meters from the Point Blanche House of Detention. Drones are also not permitted within 50 meters of the following areas: the Police Detention Center in Simpson Bay, Telem, the St. Martin Medical Center, the Fire Department in Cahill, the Courthouse in Phillipsburg, the Coast Guard Office, the Police Detention Center in Phillipsburg, the Government Administration Building, GEBE, Sol and Texaco Power and Water Plants, the St. Martin Parliament Building, the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, local headquarters on the Walter J. Nisbet Road, and the ISPS marinas. As indicated, the zone for the airport is the largest as it is necessary to protect civil aviation. The 3 kilometers encompasses Maho Beach, Simpson Bay, Mullet Bay, and Kimsha Beach. Therefore, no drone activities will be permitted on these beaches. Exemptions and authorizations will only be possible for specific activities such as inspections, search and rescue operations, patrolling, and other specified commercial activities. The requests for exemptions must go through the Department of Civil Aviation on Canagita Street. These restrictions will be strictly enforced. The Department of Civil Aviation is also finalizing a full policy to address the use of drones and other remotely piloted aircraft. We are also considering all the pros and cons as it relates to the operations of these remotely piloted aircraft. I also ask that using drones take all necessary precautions to avoid flying the drones indoors or in areas where there is a crowd or between houses, as doing this creates a significant safety risk for the pilot and the inhabitants and their property. It is also advised that you have someone with you while using a drone as a spotter who can help you navigate safely. In regards to the 4th Annual Dutch Caribbean AML Gaming and Regulation Forum on St. Martin, which is to be held on June 4th to June 7th, the government of St. Martin, as I mentioned in last week's press briefing, has agreed to have GovRisk to host the 4th annual event. To register, as registration has now been officially open for the event, is to simply go on the link www.govrisk.org/DCGRF2019 and then click on the registrations and to reserve your space, as the early registration rate of $1,250 is available. The event, of course, will be at the luxurious, recently built Sonesta Maho Beach Resort and Casino and Spa. We have also secured very low rates, which begin for those participants coming from abroad at $130 per room per night, including all taxes and all meals. Of course, you can book your accommodations via the link www.sonesta.com/St. Martin and by entering DCAM CAM or the discount code or by calling the 1-800 number 223 0757 and quoting the special group code, or by contacting the sales office via sales@sonestastmartin.com and quoting the special discount code. The reservation link becomes live today and of course will be live until the event. This is of course the most ambitious forum to date because the St. Martin government has insisted that the focus be on the region's participation for the upcoming mutual events and evaluations of the gaming and regulation industry. We are therefore going to include government, banks, regulators, and the DNFBP sector with an emphasis on casinos and gambling. At this time, I look forward to any questions from the media.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Emil Lee, to address you.
Morning. Morning, colleague ministers, members of the media, those listening by radio, television, or internet. I have a couple points to touch on. Last week, I had an opportunity to attend, and Andrew, thank you for the reminder and the heads up, that MAHO was having a labor recruitment drive at the Bel Air, where they had set up there for the whole day, put a couple ads in the newspaper for the week, looking for people interested in working in the hospitality sector. So the good news is that the MAHO Sonesta Resort is slowly coming back online in phases. So as their construction process continues, phase by phase, they're opening up floors and wings of their facilities. And so as they phase their opening up, they need more and more workers to fill in to work in the resort, which is great news for our economy. It's a good sign that the recovery process is working. Of course, we've certainly recognized that there's still so much to do, but I think we also need to recognize the positive things. So I took the time to attend and meet with the people who are doing some of the interviews and some of the applicants. It's nice to see as well that there were graduates from the skills training program. Again, for those, a brief reminder, this is a program that started immediately after Hurricane Irma, first as a hospitality skills training program, and then later on evolved into the skills training program. It's a World Bank funded program which helps to educate the people, gives them a stipend as well as health insurance during this process. And the great thing is feedback from the staff that were there from representing MAHO was that the feedback from the customers has been tremendous. In other words, the staff that have had reduced working hours and going through the skills training program, the feedback from the customers was that the service was really outstanding. And they said that they found this impressive because they're still dealing with customers in a construction environment, right? So it isn't necessarily the ideal environment, but yet the guests were very happy because they felt that the quality of the service was so good. And so again, this is a win-win solution. So this means we've managed as government to provide support during this hard time. The skill levels have improved, the quality of service has improved, and we're seeing a product that's come back obviously built new and also with high levels of service. The good news as well is that they're looking for people to start immediately. They say there's an urgent need. So, and I don't think that they've found sufficient numbers for their requirements, so they are planning on having a second recruitment conference, a second drive. So again, I encourage those in the community who are looking for work, make sure that you attend, make sure you put your resumes together. It's an opportunity for full employment. The second thing I'd like to do is remind everyone that next week on Tuesday, March 19th, from 3:30 to 6 p.m., we have our meet and greet session. This is an opportunity for those in the reconstruction industry. So we're looking for companies who are related to the reconstruction process. So in particular, material suppliers, contractors, subcontractors, but it could be AC companies, ICT companies, plumbing companies, drywall, tilers, anyone who's related to the reconstruction industry. And really, we have a couple objectives. Number one, government wants to listen to the industry. We want to understand what can we do to help to stimulate or facilitate the reconstruction process. So we want to listen to what are the challenges that are being felt. As I've said, we have some indications that the construction sector in particular is slowing down. We also have some indications that it is a highly non-compliant sector, meaning that there's a lot of companies that are working without their proper registration, without paying their proper taxes and social premiums. And so we'd like to get some feedback from the sector because, as the media recalls, we have an incidental work permit policy. So right after Irma, we put a policy in place to facilitate the reconstruction process. And this is a process that some of the larger projects have taken advantage of, which means they've been able to bring in workers from abroad with criteria. So that means they had to provide them housing, they had to prove that they're paying their social premiums, their taxes, and the permits are non-renewable only for the construction of that particular project. Once the project is done, they have to go. So this policy was put in place in order to stimulate the reconstruction process, but based on the feedback that we're getting, the ministry feels that we need to get a more in-depth perspective as to what's happening and if we need to revisit this policy and perhaps stop the incidental work permit policy. But again, we need feedback from the community, we need feedback from the industry as to whether this is an appropriate decision or not. So encourage everybody to come out. Again, this is March 19th. It's going to be held here at the new government building from 3:30 to 6 p.m. We would appreciate if people would confirm their attendance. The phone number that they can call, 520-5270. That's 520-5270. Thank you. Next topic I'd like to touch on briefly. So this week, attached to the Disaster Health Conference that was held at the AUC in partnership with the AUC and Harvard Medical School, we had a number of people that attended for the conference, Dr. Wheeler from PAHO, who then also supported the invite of Dr. Lalta and Dr. Cumberbatch. These are people, so Dr. Cumberbatch actually was the equivalent of a Surgeon General in Trinidad and Tobago, and Dr. Lalta is a professor in the university, actually they're both professors now in the University of West Indies, heavily involved in the universal health financing, so health economists, and tremendous resource for the country in the number of conferences they've put together over the years. So we organized, since they were here, we have the technical expertise, so together with PAHO and the two professors from UWI, from the University of West Indies, we organized two sessions. On Monday evening, we organized a session in particular to listen to the concerns of medical professionals. And on Tuesday, we had a session for the media, and we had an opportunity to videotape that, capture some of it on video, and we will cut them up into pieces that we can start with perhaps putting them out on Facebook to help to educate the public as to some of the broader ideas behind universal health coverage. So, you know, the ministry is working extremely hard on reforming our entire healthcare sector. You know, we've put a lot of effort into the hospital project, but also increasing the range of specialists that are here on the island, all with the philosophy of delivering affordable, quality health care close to home. But the second part of that is, if we build all of these services and facilities here, but if our people don't have the insurance or the finances to access it, then that's a problem. So we need to make sure that as part of our entire healthcare reform process, that the health financing is sustainable and gives a basic, what we believe is a basic human right of access to healthcare and access to health insurance in a way that's financially sustainable. So we felt that it was important to engage the medical professionals, to hear from them what their concerns are about the universal health coverage. And the interesting thing is, as we spoke to the technical advisors, their experience has been that every country, large and small, has gone through exactly the same process. You have a community that's got different perceptions in terms of it's unaffordable, it's not realistic, and then the human rights perspective of that everyone should have access to health insurance so that they can access care without being financially burdened, without undue financial hardship. So I think we had an excellent meeting. It was Monday evening. We had about 10 different healthcare providers represented, including a number of general practitioners, physical therapists, dentists, the hospital, the White and Yellow Cross, representation from the board of SZV, and the discussions were, I think, extremely positive. They had an opportunity to express their frustrations with our current system. The shortcomings of our present healthcare insurance and financing were brought forward by many of them. And actually what it really does is it highlights that the need for change, and actually the general health insurance legislation that we're proposing actually facilitates the possibility for a fundamental change. And so one of the points that we really brought across and expressed to the healthcare providers was the general health insurance will allow us to re-look at and renegotiate the compensation model for the healthcare providers. They've all been talking about how they would like to, how they need to earn more money. And the worldwide trend is focus more on prevention, focus more on what we can do to identify diseases at an earlier stage where they can be treated much simpler, they can be treated locally, and a lot of it can be treated also with lifestyle changes. So for managing our overall healthcare costs, the more we can catch it at an earlier stage, the better it is for our healthcare financing and for the community and for quality of life. And actually our current system doesn't really allow for that, neither the structure with the family practitioners, but also in terms of what SZV, in terms of legislation, is allowed to finance. Actually, they're not allowed to finance preventative health care programs. They're focused only on the curative part. Again, only drives the need for reform. The Department of Public Health had an opportunity to explain some parts of the legislation, but again, our focus was really on the overall concepts within the concept. Again, I was very happy with the conversation. I think that everyone was focused on making suggestions so we could make critical comments, constructive comments, and see how we can incorporate those in the legislation and the plan going forward. The second day was also positive with the media, an opportunity for them to ask questions and capture that for dissemination to the public. The last topic I'd like to touch on briefly is the role of the Ministry of VSI in terms of from a public health perspective. And I'm going to come around a little bit, long way, but to a specific point. So as a ministry, the ministry has two specific roles. Number one is from a policy perspective, public health perspective. So in other words, we are here to ensure that the quality, the standards of the care are sufficient for the population. And the ministry also has the inspectorate, so it also has a regulatory function. The healthcare providers also have a role. So everyone, especially even as we talk about general health insurance, understand that different entities have different roles and responsibilities, right? So the ministry has the responsibility to adhere to legislation as it pertains to the registering of healthcare professionals to practice and service the population of St. Martin. And this is governed by the national ordinance regulating the execution of healthcare, which outlines conditions and criteria for healthcare professionals willing to serve on St. Martin. In order for the ministry to serve the population, especially on matters such as healthcare, it cannot be careless and must ensure that permits are granted on a screening protocol set by law for public safety purposes. The ministry often sees requests that do not meet these criteria set in law. So while it's always the mission to work within the boundaries of the law, when facts are presented that do not allow us to move forward within our legal limits, permits are not granted. So I want to explain. So in other words, sometimes healthcare providers bring requests for medical doctors to come to practice in St. Martin, but yet the qualifications that they have, and I'm not saying they may not be good physicians from wherever they come from, but they do not meet our legislative requirements, and then we always end up in some sort of a tussle about, the need of the community and should we bend the law and what are we allowed to do? And I am bound by the laws that are in place for the country. So these outcomes are discussed with our stakeholders, and we trust that they share our interest not only in compliance with the law, but also our commitment to safety. And so we struggle sometimes with finding the balance, and this is why we're working on our St. Martin BIC and what is our registration requirement and how we can improve that process, how we can streamline it. But we need to find the balance between flexibility and ease and as well as the quality and public safety. So we need to balance those. Some of the examples that the applicants need to meet are they have to be registered with the licensing authority in the country that they're currently practicing. So they need to be registered somewhere. And the idea behind that is if there's ever an issue with the doctor, they need to have a sort of a standard place that people could register a complaint so that you know about the performance, right? An equivalent education to Dutch standards. So in other words, we have standards set in law about what are their educational requirements, and if they have not gone through a Dutch educational system, they need to be able to show that their education is comparable, and that, again, makes sense. And they need a letter of good conduct. So these are just not a comprehensive list, but an example of some of the points that they need to comply with. So I noticed on Facebook a post by a television host saying that the Mental Health Foundation is pleading with Minister Lee for a psychiatrist. And I read that and I felt a little bit, concerned about the statement because, again, understanding the role of the different entities. It is not the role of the ministry to source or find medical professionals for institutions. So one of our local healthcare institutions currently faces challenges with the recruitment of qualified healthcare professionals, and that is the Mental Health Foundation. The Ministry of VSA is in an ongoing consultation with mental health regarding their recruitment processes, obstacles, and permitting procedures. We've done everything we can to facilitate, and we recognize the value of mental health, especially after Hurricane Irma. We recognize that post-traumatic stress, and I actually expect that as we approach the hurricane season, a lot of people find that their house is not in the condition that they would like it to be in, that level of tension and stress is only going to rise in the community. And I want to just remind the public, for example, in the past, we had a gentleman who, after seeing one of our press conferences, felt so compelled to support the country that actually he called and he offered to donate 3 vehicles to the ministry. And actually, when he contacted the ministry, I felt that, look, we have a number of programs we're working on through World Bank, and at that time I already made a request to Holland for vehicles for the Ministry of VSA. What did we do with the 3 vehicles that were very kindly offered as a donation? We donated them to the Mental Health Foundation because we recognized their financial need. And if I recall, it saved them somewhere around $25,000 a year because they were leasing vehicles so they could cancel the leases and save that money. So again, we have historically done whatever we could to support the Mental Health Foundation. As a matter of fact, we're taking up their request for a new building. We're looking at their request and proposing that it will be brought to the World Bank for financing. They have issues with their current building and size and the way that it's organized. So again, I find that we've done a lot to support the Mental Health Foundation. The Mental Health Foundation has made known to the ministry that their financial conditions pose an additional challenge in the recruitment of qualified professionals that meet the standards of St. Martin laws. The ministry does recognize the indicated need by the Mental Health Foundation, and a proposed solution to mental health has been to seek out healthcare professionals from the EU or BIC registered companies. And this approach could yield more suitable candidates with a higher chance of meeting the criteria of St. Martin. It's often the case that institutions seek out more economically beneficial recruitment routes. So in other words, because they are driven by their finances and limited resources, they have a tendency to look for individuals that are less expensive. In other words, their salaries are lower. But sometimes it means that the qualifications perhaps are a little bit lower as well, and then that is where you meet the challenge between the requirements and the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. The Minister of Justice, the Honorable Cornelius de Wever, is present. However, I stand corrected. He is present indeed and will be making opening remarks. Minister de Wever, I invite you.
A few weeks ago, we received the metal sharks and watched them as they were offloaded at the harbor, which was followed a few days later by Father Adam blessing the vessels before launching them into the water. Weeks of training has finally been completed. It was indeed a pleasure to be present yesterday for the inauguration of the metal sharks. Despite minor setbacks and minor adjustments, we have to acknowledge General Levin and everyone involved in the process to ensure that St. Martin has not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 new metal sharks to protect our lagoons, beaches, coast, and all those who enjoy boating. These metal sharks cannot function by themselves, And I'd like to acknowledge all the men and women under the leadership of one of our very own, Mr. Roberto Livingstone. I'd like to emphasize to the men and women the importance of their role in the Coast Guard. Their careers have been expanded from 5 to 7 years, which is also followed by their ability to transfer to other departments within the justice chain, such as the police, customs, immigration, should they, of course, so desire. As we always say, and the good book says, to whom much is given, much is required. Mr. Livingstone, I believe, is a role model that many of our young people should be looking up to. Born in Sabre and residing in St. Martin for many years as a police, then the Coast Guard, then he was the chief of security at the harbor, and now he is back to the Coast Guard in his leading role. And with everything going on around us, I asked him to maintain the course and continue to build this organization stone by stone and one achievement after the other. It is also important to stress the importance of cooperation, not only with Aruba, Curacao, and the Netherlands, but more importantly with our brothers and sisters on the northern side, Sabre and Statia, Anguilla, and St. Bart's. With our strategic location, we must be our brothers and sisters' keeper on the water. And when the call of distress comes, as it sometimes does, it is comforting to know that the Coast Guard provides search and rescue missions. They also focus on prevention, for example, during the Heineken Regatta, as well as our famous August Mondays. But we need to remain vigilant of those with wrong intentions, like transporting drugs, money, weapons, and people. The role of the Coast Guard and the use of the metal sharks cannot and should not be taken for granted. We have to protect the investments that we have made in St. Martin, our tourism industry, and the marine industry. I humbly ask them to execute their task with respect and integrity. At the end of each shift, I ask them to make sure that the anchor drops at home or rises on the lift, and that every man and woman is safe on our shores. Those are my opening remarks today, and I thank you.
Thank you, Minister De Weaver, for your opening remarks. If you have just joined us, you're watching the Live Council Ministers Press Briefing. We now move on to the question and answer session. I now call on Stephen C. William from PJD2.
Thank you. Good morning, Mrs. How many questions do I have?
One round of questions.
I'm going to pass.
Ms. Alita Singh from the Daily Herald.
Thank you so much, Charity. Good morning to the ministers. I have a quick clarification, not a clarification, I think a correction. The press statement sent out by the Minister of Finance only mentioned businesses. So we just want to make sure that the other parties, we want to make sure then that the tax department and the receivers know that individuals can also apply. That was my clarification. I still have a question.
Yes, just to clarify, yes, this was, instruction went out to the tax department
Okay.
and the receiver's office in that
Perfect, thank you.
sense.
My question is now to the Minister of Tourism. Of course, we have seen in the news the banning or the grounding of the 737 MAX jets in the European Union. Canada and the United States are currently the holdouts. We do have those jets coming in here. Caribbean Airlines, for instance, uses the 737 MAX jets. Is St. Martin considering any kind of precaution against these aircrafts?
Thank you, Alita, for your question. Of course, the Department of Civil Aviation, and in particular the Minister of TIAT, my person, have closely monitored the developments in regards to the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft, and I expect an advice from the relevant department on my desk within short. Of course, St. Martin is now currently serviced by 5 airlines that are approved to operate this type of aircraft, which are, of course, Air Canada, American Airlines, Copa Airlines, Sunwing Airlines, and WestJet. That was the latest briefings that I received from the respective department. So I hope to have that announcement to the press within short in regards to what is the position of the government of St. Martin in consultation with the relevant Department of Civil Aviation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Mr. Wendell Moore from SeymourJournal.com. You may now have the floor.
And since I'm here, why another question? And it's directed to the Minister of TIAT. You mentioned quite an extensive drone use policy when it comes to the areas that are prohibited. I just wanted to know if you have a plan of communicating your drone policy to visitors who often do production, and whether or not they have any information about the drone restrictions. How do you plan to communicate this to those people, as well as those who use them here as well and may not have heard this one announcement?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for, of course, your question. Of course, welcome to the amazing and professional media corps that we have on St. Martin. It's good to see you here. But in regards to your question, social media is an amazing tool that, of course, is used on a constant basis, both for our local population as well as for visitors alike. So that is, of course, going to be part of the publications going out immediately since this announcement, and, of course, through even local media. Many tourists and visitors, of course, listen to all sorts of media from St. Martin, and that's why at times we have to be very conscientious of that, not use it now for another means, but of course use it for the positivity of moving this country forward. Part of the publications, of course, will include a visual outline of what it will look like from a more visual aspect. The department has already provided that to the cabinet. I've looked at it. It has some considerations for adjustment, and once that is finalized, it will be part of the publications going out to inform the public as well. Part of the agreement, of course, signed is that the software within the drones, the manufacturer, has also been contacted by the relevant department that will also be incorporated into the software itself. So the restrictions will come from the manufacturer itself in terms of what are the restricted areas. And that, of course, is the beauty of technology, that instead of just speaking about it cosmetically, we also get directly to the source, and that issue has been addressed via the Department of Civil Aviation to the manufacturers of the drones as well.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Mr. Lyndon Brown from BCN TV, you may now have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and the ministers. After a day of prayer, the minister looked very refined today. So great things have happened. Question to Minister Smith. Minister Smith, last week we was speaking about NIPA, and the emphasis was about the finance of NIPA. The Dutch government have donated 50 million for the enhancement in tourism, hospitality, and construction. You was there Wednesday afternoon last, Minister Smith. What was your finding? Do NIPA need financial enhancement? And will the Dutch readily donate again if necessary?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for your question. Yes, I was at NIPA and got quite an explanation about the program, the curriculum. Unfortunately for you, they did not mention finances as being the major problem. Of course, each institution needs financing in order to be able to develop, to grow, and to move forward. And NIPA needs it also. But they are with the subsidy that they are receiving from government, and the programs that are ongoing, that money was not given to NIPA but was given to another foundation, where the courses and the programs are being given at that institution. But of course NIPA needs finances, but that was not the focus of our discussion. Our discussion was major looking at the product, what is NIPA delivering, and how it can improve its programs.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Mr. Andrew Bishop from St. Martin News Online, you may have the floor.
Thank you very much, Charity. Ministers, good morning. Question for Minister Lee. Some healthcare providers feel that if a national healthcare insurance is introduced, it will only mean that there will be longer appointment dates for patients, since there will be more people coming into the system. This will obviously mean that with the limited amount of specialists, it will only cause problems. I will give you an example. For example, I went to get my eyes checked, and I had an appointment for July. This is 3 months ago. If we have a health care that is for everyone, then I think that we will have a serious problem. People will die in the process.
Thanks for the question. As a matter of fact, this is a topic that did come up on Monday in our discussions. So a couple things. If there's an urgent need, there's always the possibility for people to be referred on an immediate basis, right? So for urgent reasons, that should never be the case. And what we found is, so what are we really talking about is we're talking about pent-up demand. So in other words, people who have not had access to care. We are seeing the same, the eye specialists as well as the urology. So in other words, in the past, because the specialty was not available locally, they didn't see any specialists. So they waited until it became such a serious problem that they had to be referred abroad, in which case the country then spent money not only for the medical services, but for the travel, for the hotel, for the companion, for the per diem, right? So now by making the service available locally, people who have, let's say, a minor issue that before they wouldn't take care of, now are going to get checked. So this is all part of that prevention philosophy, the diagnosing early. What every country has found is as you reduce the barriers, so either by giving access to insurance or by adding those services locally, you do indeed see a temporary increase in demand. Aruba's seen it, Curaçao's seen it. It's a worldwide trend that when you reduce the barriers, you're going to see that increase, right? So, but that increase does level off. They say it usually takes between a year to 2 years, and then you will see those waiting times or those longer times reduce. In the meantime, they have the possibility to bring in visiting specialists to try and ramp up the amount of physicians available. So we're very much aware of it and also anticipated it that as you reduce the barriers, then you'll see this increase in consumption, but it is usually for a very limited period of time, and then you start to see it normalize.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers. This brings us to the end of the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. For video on demand, log on to the official government website at stmartingov.org. For rebroadcast, tune in every evening at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I am Charity Dunker, bidding you a pleasant day further.